At a formal dinner hosted by my billionaire husband's family, an event meant to impress foreign investors and cement a legacy, I was publicly humiliated in front of the very empire I helped build. With a curled lip and a voice dripping disdain, his Aunt Claudia sneered across the table, "Why is the maid sitting with us?" The words landed like a slap in the face, reverberating through the grand dining hall filled with crystal chandeliers, oil-painted ancestors, and old money arrogance. I said nothing. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't cry or fight. I simply excused myself, stepped away for a moment, and sent a text. One short message that would quietly unravel a $690 million deal and begin the slow collapse of the Morgan dynasty. That night marked the end of one story, and the start of another. Hey Reddit, my name is Elena Morgan. At least, that's what the world knew me as until not long ago, the poised, silent wife at the side of Alexander Morgan, one of the most powerful men on the East Coast. To outsiders, I was a Cinderella story, a maid-turned-mogul's wife, a walking fairy tale that society didn't quite know how to categorize. But the truth was more complicated, and far more powerful. Behind the tailored gowns and polite smiles, I was more than a pretty face. I was the architect behind half of what they flaunted as their family's legacy. And that dinner? That single moment of calculated cruelty? It was the spark that lit the fuse. I met Alex 5 years ago, back when I was working in operations at a struggling boutique hotel. He had invested in it, a side project for him, a lifeline for me. I wasn't cleaning rooms or fetching towels, no matter what Claudia later implied. I was managing logistics, restructuring contracts, and transforming a money pit into a profitable gem in under 8 months. Alex noticed. He was intelligent, charming, and yes, a little spoiled, but he respected results. We fell in love not because of our similarities, but because we admired what the other had survived. When we married, I walked into the Morgan world with grace, and a storm of resentment. His mother, Vivian, offered thin smiles and sharper words. His aunt couldn't mask her revulsion when she learned I had once lived with 3 roommates in a cramped studio. To them, I would never belong. But Alex stood by me, at least in the beginning. He defended me during whispered insults at charity galas and awkward silences at family dinners. Or so I thought. When I led the charge on a $690 million hotel acquisition, something I poured my soul into for nearly a year, I had hoped things had changed. I met with global investors, analyzed structural blueprints, assessed disaster recovery sites, and drafted a 45-slide presentation that turned skeptics into believers. The ROI projection was 240% over 10 years. It wasn't a guess, it was calculated brilliance. And still, at that dinner table, none of them cared. Not about the woman who made it happen. Not about me. We sat in the Morgan Estates dining hall, a room designed to scream prestige and drown out truth. There were towering chandeliers, priceless art, and enough polished silver to reflect every cold glance. The guest list included every key family member, a few board members, and the very international partners whose trust I had earned. I wore a modest ivory dress, understated pearl earrings from my late mother, and a smile that cost me everything. Claudia, loud and deliberate, chose that moment to cut deep. Who let the maid sit at this table? Silence followed, thick and suffocating. Alex didn't say a word. He sipped his wine, looked away, pretended not to notice. I didn't respond, not verbally. I didn't throw my glass or demand respect. I quietly stood, excused myself, and walked to the powder room. One message: freeze the merger. We need to reassess. That was it. Elena May. That text triggered a chain reaction. The next morning, while the Morgans congratulated themselves on yet another successful soiree, my legal team contacted the board and the international partners. We raised concerns. Meetings were postponed. Confidence wavered. Within days, key investors pulled out, and rumors of instability began leaking. The deal faltered. The Morgan name trembled. Alex confronted me by the weekend. He tried to keep his voice level, but his eyes were sharp with panic. What are you doing, Elena? This merger matters. I met his gaze and said, you watched them demean me in front of your colleagues and investors, and you said nothing. He fumbled for words. I wasn't trying to embarrass you. I replied. You didn't need to. Your silence did that for you. This wasn't about one insult. This was about years of subtle degradation. Years of me being sidelined, diminished, dressed up for display but never taken seriously. So I did what I had to. I walked away from the table, figuratively and literally. Over the following weeks, I met discreetly with the stakeholders. Some tried to salvage the merger. Others privately admitted they were glad I had stepped in. The message was simple. If I wasn't treated like an equal, I wouldn't stand in the shadows propping up their empire. I still loved Alex, in a way. But I loved myself more. I had fought too hard to become a woman of power just to be reduced to a family's decoration. At a final board meeting, I formally terminated the deal. No press release, no spin, just silence. The loss was staggering. Projections evaporated. Years of planning unraveled. Vivian clutched her pearls like they were her last defense. Claudia called me a liability. And Alex, he said nothing. That evening, I sat alone in our penthouse. Tea in hand, lights of the city blinking below. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. I had been the quiet force behind their success, and now I was done pretending otherwise. By morning, the Morgan empire began to truly fracture. The press caught wind of the failed merger. Stock dipped, lawsuits threatened, boardroom whispers turned into boardroom screams. Claudia sent me a fruit basket. I returned it, untouched. Alex tried to reach me in the aftermath. His tone shifted from remorse to blame. You've humiliated my family. But he still didn't understand. It was my decision. I had warned him long ago. If he married me, he had to stand beside me, not in front. I wasn't his accessory. I was his equal. And when they treated me like a servant, when he allowed it, he forfeited the right to my loyalty. I left him without theatrics. Just a note. Asterisk, I'm not your decoration, Alex. And I won't be your family's doormat. I checked into a boutique hotel I once helped fund. The staff welcomed me like royalty. For the first time in years, I breathed freely. Not as Mrs. Morgan, just as Elena. 2 weeks later, an unexpected knock came at my door. Darius LeYoung, one of the lead international investors, stood there. He didn't ask questions. He simply said, "You saved me a fortune. I trust your instincts. What's your next move?" And just like that, I began again. I contacted 3 former partners, 2 women and 1 man, each brilliant, fierce, and loyal. Within 6 weeks, we launched our own venture, Graves Hole, a sleek, agile investment group focused on luxury hospitality innovation across continents. It was sharper, cleaner, and more powerful than anything the Morgans could touch. As their brand struggled under the weight of infighting and media speculation, mine rose from the ashes. The final nail in their coffin came when leaked emails revealed Claudia's disdain, the maid comment to the public. Even the board turned on her. Vivian's attempts to restore the brand with desperate galas and glossy campaigns fell flat. Alex, at last, reached out, not with anger, but with sorrow. "Can we meet?" he asked. "No pressure. I just miss us." I agreed, not for reconciliation, for closure. We met on the rooftop of Morgan Plaza, the very hotel I had turned into a success. He looked older, thinner. "You really did all this," he whispered. "The empire's shaking." I nodded. "I didn't want to hurt you," I replied. "But I won't let anyone humiliate me again." His voice was quiet. "Is there any way back?" I looked at him and said, "For us? No. For you? Maybe, if you learn to stand without standing on someone else." I walked away, dry-eyed and steady. That night, I changed my name. Not out of spite, but as a declaration. I was no longer Elena Morgan. I became Elena Graves, in honor of my mother's side. The side that taught me quiet strength, fierce dignity, unshakable resolve. 6 months later, Graves Hole opened its first eco-luxury hub in Patagonia. Investors lined up before the doors even opened. Forbes named me one of the rising moguls of the decade. And for once, my name stood on its own. No borrowed prestige. No legacy handed down. I had become the empire. The Morgans still exist, but without their shine. They send me invites, holiday cards. Even Claudia reached out after our Patagonia launch, asking about a possible venture reconciliation. I never replied. Some empires crumble, others rise. And me? I built mine from the dust they thought I belonged to. Some stories end in silence. Mine ended in power. Now they'll never forget me. Not because I forced them to remember, but because the void I left behind was too loud to ignore. In their world of inherited power and polished illusions, I had been the outlier they never knew how to categorize. I didn't arrive in a chauffeured car or come with a legacy tied in satin ribbons. I arrived with vision, strategy, and grit. The kind of attributes they mistook for social inferiority. But power doesn't announce itself in diamonds or last names. It's in the quiet calculations, the precise moves, the willingness to walk away from something safe when it no longer serves your purpose. And when I walked away, I didn't slam doors or throw scenes. I let the silence do the talking, and that silence? It echoed louder than any of Claudia's passive-aggressive remarks or Vivian's disapproving glances ever could. The people who once whispered that I was just the maid, now watched my every move, some out of envy, some out of awe, and a few with regret heavy in their bones. After the Patagonia launch, things moved quickly. My team and I broke ground on 2 additional projects, one in Kyoto, nestled between ancient temples and modern marvels, and another in the coastal region of Amalfi, where sustainability met luxury in ways the hospitality world hadn't dared attempt. We weren't just developing properties, we were rewriting the rulebook. Investors flew in from Zurich, Dubai, and Sao Paulo, not for glamour shots or hollow branding pitches, but for the opportunity to be part of something meaningful. I handpicked every executive, ensured every architect aligned with our environmental and cultural values, and held weekly calls with regional directors to track progress with the kind of attention the Morgans had once dismissed as too involved. But I wasn't managing a project, I was building a legacy. One that couldn't be tarnished by an outdated family name or undermined by thinly veiled contempt. There were days when I'd find myself staring out of the glass walls of our Santiago headquarters, thinking of how far I'd come. I remembered my mother's hands, calloused from years of double shifts and quiet sacrifices. Hands that once braided my hair while whispering stories about strength that didn't need to shout. I'd think of the studio apartment, the shared bathroom, the second-hand heels I used to wear until the soles nearly fell off. None of it made me feel small anymore. If anything, it reminded me how resilient I had been long before I ever walked into that boutique hotel where Alex first saw me. That girl, hungry and determined, still lived inside me. She had never left, she'd simply evolved. Occasionally, I'd hear whispers about the Morgans. Another failed venture, another PR spin gone wrong. Alex was still at the helm, but even his once unshakable confidence had dulled. He still sent the occasional card, scrawled with polite hopes that I was doing well, sometimes including a photo of a sunset from the balcony of our old penthouse. I never responded, not because I held hate in my heart, but because I no longer held space for what once was. Closure doesn't always come with a final conversation. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the way your chest no longer tightens when you hear their name, or in how your voice doesn't quiver when you speak of the past. Sometimes, closure is simply choosing to continue forward without looking back. People often ask me now if I regret it, walking away, pulling the plug, burning the bridge. And I tell them, without hesitation, no. Because I didn't burn the bridge. I built a new one. Stronger, wider, one that others like me could walk across without fear of being called a maid or a mistake. I didn't need to be accepted into a crumbling empire built on exclusion. I needed to build a kingdom where no one questioned your right to sit at the table. And that's exactly what I did. And that, truly, was the difference. I was never asking for a seat. I was building the damn table. While the Morgans clung to legacy, I forged impact. While they guarded their gates, I opened doors. I didn't just rewrite my story. I redefined what power looked like when it wasn't inherited but earned. No longer the shadow behind a billionaire's name. No longer the woman they whispered about at dinner parties. I had become something they couldn't categorize, couldn't control, and most importantly, couldn't replace. Years from now, they'll still tell stories. About the woman who walked away from a $690 million deal with nothing but a pearl earring, a calm smile, and a single text. They'll speak of the merger that unraveled an empire. Of the empire that rose from its ashes. And maybe, just maybe, they'll remember that it was never about revenge. It was about remembering my worth, reclaiming my name, and never again shrinking to make others comfortable. My name is Elena Graves. And I was never the maid at the table. I was the storm that built the palace.